So let's talk about the fun factor when it comes to the new Toyota Tacoma, the 2024 Toyota Tacoma. You know, everybody's been spending so much energy and effort complaining about the new Tacoma's pricing and its 4-cylinder turbo that I think a lot of people are discounting the fun factor when it comes to this new truck. And that's important. It's important to me. Have you ever bought a vehicle that after you've had it for a little while, you hate it? You don't like driving it. You don't look forward to getting into it. It's uncomfortable. It's gutless. The controls are all over the place. Nothing works. That is a miserable vehicle to drive, and it kills the fun factor. So what about the 2024 Tacoma? Let's start with that 4-cylinder turbo. Does it make the truck fun to drive? More fun than the 3rd generation with a pedal commander installed? And the answer is yes. It's quick, it's peppy, it accelerates, it's got oomph, it's fun to drive. You know, no longer do you have to go out and buy a mid-sized truck and then dread driving it because it's gutless. You know, I don't know if you've ever driven any of the older, let's say, Ford Rangers. I've driven the Ford Ranger with a manual transmission. And I have to say, first of all, to be fair, the manual was good. This truck was quite old that I had driven a few times. And the manual transmission was still pretty darn good. But the truck was absolutely gutless, which meant you really had to run through the RPMs to get to the next gear, right? Not fun to drive at all. Now, I realize the truck that I have here is an automatic. It's not the manual. I still doubt whether or not Toyota had improved the manual in the 2024 at all, or just put the same manual in as what we had in the 3rd gen. I really don't know. I can't speak to that, but I can't see them investing a ton of money in manual transmission development. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they did. I don't know. But the 2024, from a power standpoint, from the 4-cylinder turbo power plant, is a lot of fun to drive. It's a blast. I love driving the truck. Next up, what about the comfort of the truck? Does that make it fun to drive? You know, one of the big complaints, there's a couple of big complaints about the 3rd gen Tacoma. One was the seating. You can't get comfortable. You can't get the angle right. You've got to go out. You've got to buy seat jackers, change the angle of the seat, raise it, lower it. You can't put it back far enough. All kinds of complaints about the seating. Now, in this truck, oh, and let me preface that by saying that was even with the 10-way power adjustable seat, right? This truck, I have a manual seat in it. But they changed the seat in such a manner that it is comfortable. I don't really need all those extras. I don't need the 10-way power adjustments because I can get the seat the way that I want it. And let's be honest, once I get the seat the way that I want it, that's it. I'm not moving it again. I'm not switching it around. Now, that could be beneficial to you, the power seats, I guess, if you share the truck with other people and they're constantly moving the seats. But keep in mind, you also need to have memory with that, because otherwise you're still just screwing around adjusting the seats every time. So for me, Toyota got it right with the 2024. The seats are just the way that I like them. I don't need to screw around with them constantly. They are the way that I want them to be, particularly with under thigh support. That was my biggest problem in the Gen 3 that I had with the power seats. I had to put seat jackers in the front to raise that front area up so that my thighs were comfortable. Might be a petty thing, but not when you sit in the truck a lot, right? Next is the gearing. How many complaints have you heard about the gearing in the 3rd generation Tacoma? And that it wasn't right, it never could find a gear, it never would ride in a gear that you thought it should ride in. I mean, I've heard it all. A big complaint about the transmission in the 3rd gen. And that makes the truck not fun to drive. It's not that way in the 2024. The marrying of the 8-speed transmission in this truck with the 4-cylinder turbo is spot on. I never sit in this truck and think, gee, why am I riding out that gear so long? Or gee, why am I in such a low gear? I'm cruising at 55, 65 mile an hour and I'm riding in fourth. I never feel that way in this truck, and that leads to making it more fun to drive. Let's talk about comfort for a minute. I mentioned the seats. Forget about the seats, the new suspension in this truck. I remember the first time that I drove one, a dealership in my area got one in. I went there, I drove it, and in addition to the quickness of the truck, one of the first things that I noticed was the smoothness of the truck. It was amazing to me, felt completely different than my third generation did. And I'm not on here to dog the third gen. Again, and I've mentioned this in other videos, this is just a step up, a step forward, if you will. Nothing wrong with the third gens, but the suspension improvements in this truck are just at another level. It's nice and smooth. You drive around, you're not getting beaten up by bumps and things. And you can really tell when you go over things, which we're gonna in a minute, like railroad tracks. You know, in the third gen, when I hit those railroad tracks, it really bounced around, right? Not like that in this truck. And I even have a lift in this truck, a 2-inch leveling lift. That even did not stiffen up the suspension enough that it bothers me at all. It still feels, honestly, like it did when I first jumped in it. Really can't even tell. There, we just went over a set of railroad tracks. Could you even tell? I don't know. What about the look? You know, that's another polarizing thing about the truck, and that does increase the fun factor, at least for me as well. You know, going out, getting in a vehicle that you think is butt ugly is not fun. It's not something that you look forward to getting into, right? I don't have that problem with this truck. It's beefy, and I know a lot of people have commented about the looks of the truck. It looks like they added a bunch of other lines and panels and stuff. And by the way, they didn't add other panels. I mean, I guess they added fender flares, but to my knowledge, every third gen Tacoma has fender flares too. They simply changed them. The one thing that they did too, which I think is kind of an optical illusion, is added a bigger indentation along the side of the truck. That makes it look like there's some sort of panel there. It's not. It's just an indentation in the stamping of the doors on the side of the truck. It gives it a beefy, more aggressive look. And I guess it depends on personal preference and what you like, but I like that look. I like the fact that the Tacoma now looks like a meaner, more muscular, beefy truck, even more so than it did before. The other thing is the interior. I don't know how many times I've heard now, and I don't know where this is coming from, people complaining about the plastics, the look of the interior of the truck. If I'm not mistaken, every truck has a lot of plastics in it. It's what's used. It's the way it is. I don't notice anything glaringly different in this truck. The only thing that I noticed between the first one that I drove and this one is that the bezeling around the radio was pewter in the first one, which led to a more kind of cartoonish look about that truck. I mentioned that in the video when I first drove that truck. In this one, it's black. A much better appointment, I think, of the trim work inside the truck. I don't really notice anything along the lines of too much plastic. People have mentioned cheap, thin plastic. I don't know what they're looking at. And I think a lot of those people, they don't like Tacomas anyway. It wouldn't matter if it was a new one or even a third gen that maybe they didn't do anything in other than left the V6, which I know a lot of people want. Those people still probably wouldn't like the Tacoma. Anyway, the fun factor. I believe the 2024 has it. It certainly does for me. And if you haven't experienced it, you really owe it to yourself, if you're a Tacoma fan, to go out, take a drive in one, and get a good opinion yourself of the fun factor and what the truck really is. Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there. Bye.